social construct.
Mhm.
And then what were your points? Like, what was your perspective? What did you disagree on with what I was saying?
Like one of the points was how you misgendered the two trans people in the video at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then you explained that in your other video, like the newer one that was made about the hate comments.
Yeah.
And like how do you know that they were never diagnosed with like gender dysphoria? Because like I've been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So like
I
it's like,
mean,
and like if you just saw me on YouTube or something, you would be like, oh well, they're just self-diagnosing.
well, the primary thing was that Riley Dennis was like, he came on a video and he said that I am transgender. And then he said that I am non binary. And then he said that I'm a lesbian. And those contradict themselves because when you're non binary, you don't affiliate yourself with a gender. You either choose to be androgynous or you choose to not associate yourself with the male or female gender identity. So when you're saying that you're non-binary and then you say that you're transgender, you're saying you're a woman, but then you're saying, oh, but I'm non-binary, so I don't affiliate with myself. I don't affiliate myself with either gender. So that's contradicting itself. So it seems that he's more just confused about his gender and what his identity actually is than actually being transgender. If he was clear about it, then I refer to him as the pronouns he prefers. But since he contradicts himself, I'm not going to refer to him as the pronouns that he apparently goes by.
But you can be non-binary and trans, because non-binary just means that that you don't identify on like either side of the gender spectrum, or like the gender binary spectrum, but like you still identify as male or female.
How can you say that you're not 100% male and you're not 100% female, but then you're going to call yourself a transgender or a lesbian, in which both definitions are gender identities in which you're a female? But when you're non-binary, you're choosing not to affiliate with either gender identities, and I don't get that.
Like me personally, I identify as agender and non-binary at the same time, because I don't consider myself to be male or female,
Yeah.
but I identify as gay as well, because I was biologically born male, but I like guys. And since I like have not transitioned at all, I still identify as gay as well.
I mean, personally, I only see two genders. And the reason being is that when you say that you're agender or when you say that you're non-binary, you're choosing not to affiliate with a gender, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you invented a gender in its entirety. To say that, okay, I am not male, I am not female, I am neither, does not necessarily mean that you invented a new gender. You're just choosing to not affiliate with the genders that already exist.
I'm just like a little bit confused at what you're saying, because like gender was came up with. So the
Well,
two
I
genders
mean,
that are the main genders are were made up with.
what do you mean? What do you mean by made up?
Like this
They
basically
were
just goes back
socially
to the social
constructed.
construct thing. It's a social construct because gender roles and like the gender binary are such big parts of society, and society came up with the gender binary. So because society came up with the gender binary is gender basically. Like it encompasses gender. So if the binary was came up by society, then gender was also created by society.
The binary wasn't made up by society. Biology made up the binaries. Like there's biological evidence that supports both binaries. There are certain characteristics that males have that females don't have. There are certain characteristics that females have that males don't have. There are also neurological differences between males and females that create that binary, that, you know, create that definition of that gender. I do agree that gender roles is socially constructed, because I said this in another live stream. Boys being associated with the color blue isn't something that's in your genes, it's something that society made up. But things such as males being more aggressive, being more, having a larger sexual drive, that's something that has a biological basis to it. And things that like females are associated with, like nurturing roles, that's something that biology is based on. Like females are able to conceive, that's why they have nurturing roles. That's why you see more of them in nurturing roles in society. It's not something that's just been made up and stereotyped. I I just don't get this idea that gender is socially constructed when there's a biological basis on it.
But your only evidence in your video was the John Money case, and the things that he did were close to being considered insane.
He was the man who termed gender as a social construct. People wonder where this term comes from, where this idea that gender is a social construct comes from. It's from his studies that sociologists and psychologists term gender as a social construct. He's the one who gave it that definition. In his studies, all of the studies he did multiple studies. They were all meant to prove that gender is learned, that gender had no biological basis to it. And I put that in my video because to see who created the idea that gender is a social construct gives people an idea on where that ideology even came from. And then I can't remember what else you said in the Instagram post. Was that just it?
Let me look.
Guys, it doesn't matter what gender they are. I don't get why everyone keeps mentioning that. We don't need to go on about that.
Oh, I asked why you think you have room to say anything when you identify as female.
I mean, I've read a comment about this in one of my videos. Someone said that I shouldn't even talk about it because I'm cis and I don't know what trans people go through. And I feel like that's very ignorant to say, because anyone can have an opinion on any topic and anyone can have a reasonable opinion on any topic. I feel like the opinions I've expressed in my video isn't just something that I've made up. It's not just biases. I presented evidence on why I believe a certain way. And I think it's healthy for anyone to have an opinion on anything. And I think it's okay for anyone to, if we're going to be realistic, freedom of speech, of course, but also a lot of people who have their opinions, it's not just something that they've made up. It's something that they've gained knowledge on, they've researched, they've studied, they've gotten information from it. It's not just ignorant beliefs. I like to think that my opinions on transgender people and gender in general is not just ignorant beliefs. I've done research on this. That's why I put it online.
But still, as a person who identifies as female, how do you think you have a right to say anything about never, and like, how do you think you have a right to say anything about people who don't identify as either or identify as trans when you've never gone through anything like that, even if there's research to back it up?
Well, I mean, for one, you don't necessarily have to go through something to have an opinion on it. And two, this is not me trying to be rude or anything, but anyone has the right to say anything. Anyone has the right to have an opinion on anything. And anyone has a right to speak on what they want to speak about. And thirdly, when it comes to being agender, being non-binary, obviously I am a cis woman, like I'm straight, like I haven't experienced that. But when you do research on things, you can still gain knowledge on certain ideologies. Like when it comes to transgender people, there's research to show that transgender people have a mental condition. When it comes to people who categorize themselves as non-binary and people who categorize themselves as agender or genderqueer or gender non-conforming or gender fluid, there's no scientific basis to that. It's, if I'm going to be blatantly honest, it's people inventing their definitions of what a gender is. Um, if we were to go by the definition of gender as a social construct, there obviously could be an infinite number of gender, because I've said this in other live streams. The pillow right behind me, I could categorize it as a gender if gender is a social construct. People are just inventing their definition for a gender when there's no evidence or basis behind it. There's reasons why we have science and why we have biology to explain things, because socialization cannot explain everything. Socialization cannot explain what a gender is. There has to be a biological basis behind it. There's a biological basis why males are considered males and why females are considered females. There's no biological basis as to why someone identifies themselves as gender nonconforming, other than the fact that they invented that definition for themselves. And that's just my opinion. I personally only see two genders for that reason, because regardless of anything, biology explains the gist of things that society can't.
But biology and sociology aren't all that it is to gender. It's also mentally. Like when I first went to see a psychologist, I was a wreck and I identified as male. I hated myself. I tried to kill myself numerous times. I threatened to kill myself numerous times because I didn't feel comfortable at all. And then when I started to identify as female, I did not feel comfortable at all. Same as when I identified as male. But now, since I've been going to a therapist for literally like 3 years, and now that I've started to identify with agender, I'm finally comfortable with myself and love myself and not threaten to kill myself at all. So how would you explain that, even though it doesn't deal with biology or sociology?
I mean, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist or anything. I don't have a degree in this. But the mere fact that you're not comfortable with your own gender, there's research on this. I mean, there's research on gender dysphoria, why people aren't comfortable with the gender which the sex that they were biologically given. And then this could be just another condition. This could be just another case of gender dysphoria. Those who are transgender have gender dysphoria. If you're not comfortable with the male or female binary, you might also just have another extreme case of gender dysphoria. And to an extent, I treat gender dysphoria, I treat people who are uncomfortable with their own biological sex as having a condition, just because you were born a certain way and you're not comfortable with how you were born that way. And that's not something that can be changed through like environmental reasons. That's not something that can be changed. You could go to a hospital, get surgeries, and change your change your gonads, change how you appear, but biologically you were born a certain way. Biologically you were born, you said male, right? Biologically you were born male. So that's not something you can change. Um, and the mere fact that you can't change how you were born biologically means that you have a condition in which you weren't comfortable with how you were born to begin with, and you chose to stray from that definition. Um, there's just no, I don't understand. I guess this is just the lack of research, the lack of scientific proof behind this, but I don't understand when people affiliate themselves with agender identities or gender nonconforming identities, because there's no biology behind it, there's no scientific reasoning behind it. It's just you not affiliating with the binaries that exist because it causes you stress, you have a condition or some type of reasoning behind it.
But what about the like the research that psychiatrists have done to prove the fact that some people don't identify with either gender at all?
Do you mean like gender dysphoria? That's what that is.
Yeah,
When people
I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria, and they were like, "Oh, like you're trans, like you need to start like transitioning now." And so I started to do that. Hated it. I just wasn't comfortable as female either.
Mhm.
And how do you explain the like research that like psychiatrists do, therapists do, like a ton of different people in like a mental field that back up like gender nonconforming people, like non-binary people?
Well, if we're gonna treat gender dysphoria as a condition, which I treat it as a mental condition, let's take anxiety for example. There's anxiety disorder, there's major depressive disorder. These are mental conditions. Um, these are things that are uncontrollable. People can never experience normality in the way that people who don't have anxiety or major depressive disorder, um, they can't experience normality. And no matter, like, when you have mental conditions like that, it's hard to normalize it. I don't get why people normalize gender dysphoria. Obviously, obviously for people who are transgender, transitioning is probably the better option for them. But you have to realize that these are just mental conditions, and in the grand scheme of things, you need to treat mental conditions. There's a reasoning as to why you are not, there just has to be a biological reasoning as to why you're not comfortable with the sex you were born with, and you have to, there's there's a lack of research behind it. There's a lack of scientific evidence in the sense that we're still learning about it, and we're still learning about why people experience gender dysphoria and why they're not comfortable with their own biological sex. But to say that, okay, I have this condition and I don't feel comfortable with my own biological sex, and I don't feel comfortable with the other binary, so I'm just going to create my own binary to find some source, some sense of normalization and some sense of normality. I feel like that's just very, um, I feel like that's wrong in the sense that you're just creating a new concept. You're creating a new gender. You're inventing it to normalize the situation, to normalize gender dysphoria, and I don't think it should be normalized. I personally treat it like any other disorder, like major depressive disorder. I feel like I feel like we still need to find like a cure for it. In my opinion, people are gonna think this is very harsh, but it is a disorder. Those who are transgender have it easier because they can just transition to the gender they're comfortable with. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not their biological sex, but they have a way with coping with it. And if that's your way of coping with it, I mean, it's perfectly fine. But I do believe that we need to find a cure for for gender dysphoria, because I treat it like any other mental illness, any other mental disorder.
Yeah, and maybe gender dysphoria may be considered a mental disorder like depression or anxiety, but like you, as you said, you can get treated for it and it should be treated as you're saying. I've been getting treated for it for probably like 2-3 years. I still feel the same. So how would you say that that's treating it?
To transition?
No, I've been being treated for not being on either side of the spectrum for about 3 years.
Well, are you comfortable with not being on either side?
Yes, very.
I mean, that's one way of coping with it. Those who are transgender and have gender dysphoria cope with with their distress by transitioning to the other binary. And I'm sure you have another form of gender dysphoria in which you're not comfortable with either binary, so it's just comfortable. It gives you a sense of normality, or not even normality, I don't want to use that word, but it gives you a sense of it reduces the distress by not associating yourself with both binaries, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are not biologically male. And I know you obviously know that you're biologically male and you're just not comfortable with how you were biologically. But if we look at it as a disorder, like any other illnesses, people even in the comment sections are kind of confused as to why I'm saying cure. But if we look at anxiety disorder, things like this, just mental illnesses need a cure. This is not, we shouldn't be normalizing mental disorders like this. Gender dysphoria is a mental condition, it's a disorder. I feel like we're normalizing it by saying that, oh, if you transition or if you don't associate yourself with the binaries, that's solving the issue, but that doesn't solve the issue of gender dysphoria. It's just creating a sense of, it just gives the person a sense of normality or a sense of okayness with their disorder. But I feel like it's not, I don't know, I probably come off as very transphobic when I say this, or very homophobic when I say this, but I like to think that we'd want to treat the disorder and treat it as a disorder because it is a disorder. And I feel like when people say, okay, transitioning it or inventing a new gender will help people, it doesn't help people. I don't feel like it helps people. I feel like it just kind of hides the issue and normalizes the issue of what gender dysphoria actually is. But that's just my personal opinions. I don't know.
But that's basically saying, well, gay people should be cured and treated as well because that's a mental illness. That's basically what you're saying.
That's entirely different. People who are gay, people who say that, okay, I am sexually attracted to the same gender, that's not saying that's a disorder. That's just saying, okay, that's what their sexual preferences is.
But do you verify the whole LGBTQ plus, like the whole plus side of the spectrum of gay people?
When it comes to sexuality, that's just like a completely different plane. I just personally, I can understand lesbian, bisexual. No, I can stand homosexual, bisexual, asexual, and that's heterosexual, of course, and that's about it. When you go into pansexuality or demisexuality, I just don't get that. But that's just because I only believe in two genders. So when we get to pansexuality, that's just kind of meaningless to me because I only believe in two genders. So, I mean, that's just my personal opinion, but I don't think that considering homosexuality as a disorder is the same thing as saying gender dysphoria is a disorder.
But do you consider the people who are like pansexual mentally ill as well?
No, that's a sexuality, and I don't understand pansexuality to begin with. I only believe in two genders, so I consider people I feel like pansexual is just synonymous with saying I am homosexual.
But pansexual people like everybody and are sexually attracted
Uh-huh.
to everybody.
Which is
They,
two people, two types of people, males
so,
and,
but
in my
but
opinion,
they're
at least.
attracted to the trans, a gender, that whole gender spectrum of people. So, do you consider the fact that they verify people who aren't male or female?
Well, people who are trans affiliate themselves with a gender. For example, Caitlyn Jenner is transgender. Um, she's a female.
Yeah,
So
but a
I
lot
mean,
of people who are straight or gay or anybody, they are most of the time they are attracted to the like prefer like most likely the person's genitals.
well, okay. Here's the thing with pansexuality. It, like you said, it believes it's a person who's attracted to all genders. And I don't get this notion of all genders because I only see that there's two genders. Um, so that's why I consider pansexuality as synonymous to bisexuality because there's only two genders. That's just my personal opinions. I feel like those who choose not to affiliate themselves with the gender is just that's just by choice. Um,
So do
but
you verify, so you don't verify pansexuality or any other thing that's not in the LGBTQ part?
I don't get pansexuality. I don't understand it. Because I find it kind of pointless. It's just bisexuality. It means the same thing when you're saying that you love all genders. Well, there's um, at least a lot of people believe that there's only two genders that have legitimate basis to it. So I guess I don't, there's no need for the term. So I guess I don't verify pansexuality in that sense. Um, but going back to what you were saying, is pansexuality disorder? I don't think it's a mental disorder. It's just a sexuality. If you choose to be homosexual, I don't consider that a disorder. There's no diagnosis with it. There's no condition with it. When you're transgender, that's different. That's you not being comfortable with your own gender, your own biological sex. So you either choose to affiliate yourself with another gender, or um, yeah, you that's the only other option. You just choose to affiliate yourself with the other binary.
Um, you said like you were talking about how people who don't identify as male or female choose their gender, and you also said that people who choose to be homosexual are attracted to the other or attracted to the same gender. So do you believe that sexuality is chosen over biologically based?
I mean, I haven't really done any, like, I haven't really looked into that I haven't really looked into sexuality and any biological basis to it. I'm sure there is a biological basis as to why a male is more attracted to a male than female. I think I don't quote me on this, but I think it has to do with like hormone levels to that extent. But I'm sure there is a biological basis as to why a male is attracted to a male and why a female is attracted to a female. Um,
But myself personally, when I was first put into therapy and stuff, I got my hormone levels treated and they were normal. So how would you explain me being attracted to males?
I
Exactly.
mean, again, I haven't looked into sexuality and the biological basis to it. I'm sure there is a biological basis to it. Um, I don't think it's a choice per se. I do think um, it's more just I do think there's a biological basis to it, but again, I haven't done research on it, so I can't like explain my thoughts on this topic because I have no like research to base this on. So this would be just opinion based.
Um, Why did you, I mean, you kind of already answered this with the in your hate comments video, that you didn't like the fact that the two trans people in the video were never diagnosed with gender dysphoria.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you felt like you had like the right to misgender them. So
Well, 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 for one, this again is not me trying to sound like an awful person, but anyone has a right to say anything. Um, Again, freedom of speech. A lot of people said that I don't have the right to misgender them. Um, Anyone has the right to say anything really online.
but it can make a person feel so bad. Like, how would you, like, I mean, I don't know you personally, so I don't know how like you would feel about it, but like it just feels kind of like wrong almost when somebody uses the wrong pronouns. So like
Well, the thing is, since a lot of people were offended by this, actually, it wasn't just it's not just about this question on its own. Riley Dennis, he doesn't even have like a legitimate basis to what his gender is. He doesn't know what to I like he doesn't have I just don't understand what he's identifying with. When you, like I said earlier, when you're saying you're a transgender woman and then you're saying you're non-binary, that contradicts itself.
I
Also,
well, I'm saying when I first started going to a therapist and psychiatrist, I
mhm.
had they told me I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria, but so they had me start to transition, but I didn't like it and I hated it, like identifying as female. So I stopped transitioning and went to agender. So I
That's
identify as agender, but Riley Dennis identifies as trans, non-binary, and a lesbian.
mhm. That contradicts itself. You're either non-binary or you're male or female. If we're gonna accept, if for some ignorant reason I believe that there's more than two genders, if we're gonna consider,
You just cut out. Can you guys still hear me though? Because she left. Oh, now she's gone again. And now she's back.
hello.
Yeah, I think you like the call or something.
Oh, okay. Is it live?
Yeah.
Um, okay, can everyone hear everything? The Illuminati killed her. What? So in the video, going back to what I said, in the video where he said that sex is a social construct, in the description box of the video, he said it a website and it was everydayfeminism.com. Who writes for everydayfeminism.com? He's a journalist to everydayfeminism.com. He cited his own website. In itself, that just proves that he's biased in what he says. He's very misinformed. This kid said that chromosomes don't define who you are. Chromosomes don't define what your sex is, which I find that very misinformed. To tell people that your biological sex, what you were born with, cannot be defined by your chromosomes is very misinformed. It's completely disregarding biology and it's completely disregarding facts. And that's why I chose to misgender him, because one, he seems very confused, he seems very misinformed. I think he should get some sort of education on what he's saying before he puts that online. Especially whether or not people believe that gender is a social construct, when it comes to your biological sex, that's indebatable.
I see what you're saying there, like about Riley sourcing her own site. I get that. But when you're saying that Riley, like when Riley was saying about how chromosomes don't define your sex can change, but like your biological sex, the sex you were born, that will never change. Like
Yeah.
what you came out of somebody at, like what genitals you had, like you had that at some point. You were born that at some point. And like I agree with you on that part. Like you can't change what you were born as.
Yeah.
But I believe that you can change
Gender.
your gender and you can change your sex because genitals can be changed.
You can't change your chromosomes though.
I know, but sex isn't just chromosomes.
A large part of it is chromosomes.
A large part of it maybe, but your
Actually,
genitals.
when it comes to males, the reason why chromosomes are very definitive is that this is like very deep into it, but your Y chromosome has a region that codes for basically your gonads, for your reproductive system, for your ability to reproduce. So the mere fact that males have a Y chromosome, or not even the Y chromosome, just that segment of the Y chromosome defines them as males. If you don't have, even if you had the Y chromosome, if you don't have that region of the Y chromosome that codes for those sexual reproductive organs, then you're not considered male. That's why chromosomes are very vital.
So you consider somebody like Caitlyn Jenner who has had uh, a sex change, do you still consider them male?
100%. Biologically, 100%.
But you consider her female as in gender?
Gender as a female, yeah. But biologically male, 100%
But why
male.
do you not consider Riley female? Like when it comes to gender?
Well, if Riley can go show me documentation that he has gender dysphoria, then I'll publicly apologize. Or he stops spreading misinformation online, and if he clarifies what his actual gender identity is, because I honestly don't understand it. He contradicts himself. He spreads misinformation. It seems more like he's just doing it for attention, if anything, because I haven't seen, like, beyond anything, beyond any controversial topic, it's clear with 99% of sane people that sex is biologically based, that sex is biology. And to come on a video and say that, okay, well, sex isn't exactly biology, it's mostly just socially constructed, your gonads, your hormones, your chromosomes can't define who you are, that's just misinformation. That's being ignorant, and pretty much, if I'm going to be frank, that's being dumb. That's why I don't really, it's not that I don't respect him as a person. Obviously, I respect people as human beings, but, well, probably not obvious, but I do respect people as human beings. But when it comes to, if you're not going to be clear about what your gender identity is, and if you're going to spread misinformation, I'm going to term you as what I see you. I see that Adam's apple. I like, you're clearly biologically male, so I'm going to refer to you as male pronouns until you actually spread decent knowledge and you actually clarify what your actual identity is, then I'll refer to you as what you want to go by. And I mean, I termed this already. I called him a transgender. I still go by it. I do think that he uses transgender as kind of, you know, fun little label to assign yourself as. I don't think he takes it seriously, because those who are actually transgender have a disorder. They have a mental condition. They experience distress when they appear as their biological form. So, I mean, people like that take steps to transition. Obviously, it's not affordable to transition, but they take steps in the right direction. Growing your hair long and putting on eyeliner and then saying, oh, I'm a transgender non-binary, does not make you transgender.
But like with what you're saying, it's like, oh, it's like the cool thing to do now is to say that you're trans. But like that's also saying like, oh, like I like cut myself, so I'm like relatable now.
I'm not saying that it's cool as in it's like the norm, like the social norm. I'm saying that people do that because they find it like fun. They find it more just attention grabby, if I were to be frank. It's not necessarily normal, like a societal norm, but it's very attention
But
grabby.
that's like saying like, oh, you cut yourself, so you're obviously just want attention.
Well, cutting yourself and identifying yourself as transgender is two different things. When you're cutting yourself, that's like a whole different like spectrum. That's like that's not that's not some that's not things that you can relate, because identifying yourself as transgender is just a title. It's a label. You're not causing harm to yourself. You're not doing anything bad to yourself per se. You're just putting a label on yourself, perceivably for attention. People who cut themselves, there could be several different reasons why they do it. People could be suicidal. People could have some type of mental condition. They could be depressed. But attaching a label onto yourself, that's not doing you harm, but it's still very like attention grabby.
So you're basically saying people who are transitioning like now or who use that label of trans are just doing it for attention.
I'm not saying that per se. I'm saying people who contradict themselves on what their gender identity is probably using it for attention, because they don't know what they're, when you say, again, like I've said this like 5 different times, I don't want to sound repetitive, when you say you're a transgender woman but then you say you're non-binary, that contradicts itself. That's just my personal opinions. Was there, I know we keep like talking about the same thing, was there like anything else outside of even just like the concept, is gender social construct or not? Because I want to talk about like other topics. Like, was there anything else you wanted to add to this? Otherwise,
I wanted to talk about the sex-linked traits that you talked about in your video,
mhm.
and why, like, even though you may have like research on it, why do you believe that sex-linked traits are like need to be brought out?
Well, this comes into play when this was to debunk his claim that sex is socially constructed. There are sex-linked traits that are exclusive. For example, females have sex-linked traits and males have sex-linked traits. These traits help define your maleness or your femaleness. For example, males have traits that code for their gonads that obviously are attached to their sex chromosomes. Like, these genes are coded on their sex chromosomes. Females have traits that code for their own reproductive program. reproductive organs that are coded on their own sex chromosomes. Um, that's why they are important. They help define sex as a biological concept, I mean. That's why I bring it up. This just goes back to chromosome being fundamental in defining sex as well. Um, I'm gonna go a little into depth with this. This is kind of confusing, but I did explain this in the video. Um, the Y chromosome on males, the region that I was talking about that's very important is the STR region. It's called the sex defining region, sex determining region. That region codes for genes that promote male, that not promote, but they characterize maleness, they characterize the male organs, they characterize the male reproductive organs. That's why they are important, and that's why the Y chromosome is important in characterizing a male as a male, and why not having a Y chromosome would deem you as a female.
But how would you explain intersexed people and what sex-linked traits they would have as being intersexed?
Well, sex-linked people have reproductive organs for both. For obviously, they have reproductive organs for both binaries. So if you look at their, if not even looking at their chromosomes, if you look at intersex people in general, they're considered a genetic defect, and I'm going to be blatantly honest with this. They aren't able to reproduce. They're considered sterile. That's why considered a genetic defect. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've invented or created or defined a third sex. It just means that there was an issue when it came to them. There was just an issue when when the parents were reproducing, in that they have both reproductive systems from both binaries. So that doesn't constitute a third sex, but that does characterize that they are a genetic defect. I mean, with a lot of things, like if you look at Klinefelter syndrome and Turner syndrome, those people aren't able to reproduce. They're sterile. That's a genetic defect. And those with, I could be mixing this up, but I think those with Turner syndrome are deemed females, I believe, because they don't have the Y chromosome, but they're more manlier in appearance. Like they have some male reproductive organs, and they are larger per se than the average female. And the same goes for Klinefelter syndrome as well. So it's more just considered a genetic defect than it is considered a third sex.
Okay, I get what you're saying there. Kind of like what you said with like the how the biological sexes, how they like look, like how you said men are typically larger. I
Yeah.
was born male, but I am like 4'9", and like at like really short. So, and like I have a very feminine, like small face, small hands, small feet. Like
Mm-hmm.
even though I was biologically born male, how would you explain those biological traits?
I mean, there are males who are skinny. There are males who are more feminine, like they appear more feminine. Like it's more just your genes. It's your genetics. Some males will never have beards. Some males will always, not to sound TMI, but some males will always have small dicks. Like they will never change when it comes to, they will hardly change when it comes to puberty. It's more just genetics than it is than anything else. But this could also add on to why you have gender dysphoria. But again, there's a lack of research on this topic in general. I feel like we're learning more about the basis of gender dysphoria and why people experience it. So, I mean, there's still yet to be learned.
Like more research could be done
Yeah.
to defend like each side of the argument.
Yes. Yeah, the one thing I'm gonna say, I don't want to sound harsh when I say anything. Obviously, I can't say I'm 100% accurate with what I'm saying because there's still a lack of research on what gender dysphoria actually is, what it stems for. There's still a lack of research on the biological basis for sexuality, for example, or gender. So I can't accurately say that, okay, gender is 100% solely biological based. But the things that I can be definitive with is that there's only two genders, because when we look at just the mere concept of biology, biological species are able to reproduce. Um, and it's just outside of the two binaries, there's no other, like, I just don't get that concept. Males, like, those are the two binaries that are able to reproduce together. That's why I define it as the only two binaries the only two genders that exist. I don't consider any other genders as being credible or legitimate, because outside of that, it's just, there's just no biological basis to that.
But the gender binary, there isn't multiple binaries. There's only one. It's on one side it's male, the other side it's female. Anything
Mhm.
in between is in between, and like that's the gender binary. So it's basically how you feel or want to express yourself. Like, because I was born biologically male, so like what you're saying is that I should still like dress how I do, act how I do, and stuff like that, but still identify as male.
I'm not necessarily saying that. I mean, you can choose to identify as whatever you feel comfortable with. I am just saying that in the grand scheme of things, I'm gonna sound harsh. I'm gonna probably sound transphobic to a lot of people, but you have to realize that gender dysphoria is a condition, like I've said earlier. I treat it as major depressive disorder, anxiety disorder. It's just something that needs to be treated, and we don't have enough research on the topic. We don't have enough studies to conclude why gender dysphoria came about and what's the biological reasoning behind it, how it's affecting people as it is right now. Um, like you said you were born more feminine like, in a way, whatever feminine is to an extent. But you were born more feminine like. You grew up more feminine like, and that could be a basis as to why you're experiencing gender dysphoria, but we don't know much about it to have any conclusions on the whole thing. um
But how you said like I grew up like because I was born smaller, I was like raised in a more feminine way, but
mhm.
I was not at all. My parents, whenever I'd ask stuff like, "Oh, why was I born male? Why couldn't I have been born female?" Stuff like that, they're always like, "Oh, you're a boy. You're a boy. You're a boy." Stuff like that. And so
I
I
I
had to.
didn't mean sociologically based. God, I can't speak. I didn't mean that you were socialized into being a male. I meant that you grew up, like you said, that you appear just a little like skinnier, smaller, like feminine like in appearance. And that could reflect why you experience gender dysphoria. There could be something genetically that contributes to why you're experiencing gender dysphoria. Um, Obviously, I recognize that gender roles has an impact to an extent. I don't think gender is a social construct, but gender roles is obviously a social construct that's socially constructed. Males being associated with the color blue, like I said earlier, is something that society has constructed. It's not biologically based.
But the gender binary is basically gender roles, and that like the man should be more like predominant. The male should be like like into more stuff in like the bedroom. Like the women should cook, clean, do all the things for the kids, stuff like that. Like gender
Wouldn't
roles,
that be gender roles?
like gender roles, like are a part of the gender binary. So like, how do you like mean like the gender binary isn't a social construct, but gender roles are when gender roles
Is
are a part
gender
of it?
binary synonymous to just gender? Just the term gender? I don't understand it. Because gender roles and gender is two different things.
Yes, that is true, but the gender binary is how you identify and what like defines gender.
I'm kind of confused. Is gender binary synonymous to gender?
No,
What's the difference between gender binary and gender?
because that like you identify with your gender on somewhere on the spectrum, if at all.
Well, then in that case, if we're considering gender as being a spectrum, I don't consider gender as being on a spectrum. It's not like this probably sounds harsh. People are going to get triggered, but it's not autism. Like it's not on a spectrum.
So, like
You're
what you're
either
saying is there like so even though you've like already answered this, so what you're saying is there's just male, female. There's no choice whatsoever.
yeah. That's the reason being is that okay. You said that you were agender and that you're not comfortable with
With
a
male and
male
female.
or female gender identity.
Yeah.
That could just be because I don't want to sound harsh. Don't get offended when I say this, but that just could be solely because you have gender dysphoria. Because people who don't have gender dysphoria don't have the confusion that exists between whether they are male or female. Those who have gender dysphoria are confused with their identity.
But what about the people who haven't been diagnosed, just identify as either like trans or like gender nonconforming?
Well, if they self-diagnose themselves, that's probably like they need to get like medical advice before they can't just self-diagnose themselves. So that's
Well,
like
yeah,
self-diagnosing.
but like say somebody at like age 3 is like, oh, I'm not comfortable at all being like male. So at like the earliest age possible, like they go to a doctor to start like to ask about like treatment and stuff, but they've never even been diagnosed with gender
At
dysphoria.
age 3, they're a child. They don't even know what like they probably don't even know what like the word gender even means or sex or biology, for example. Like I don't get that. Do you mean
Well,
like
yeah,
kids in
but
general?
because gender is so shoved down children's throats that they have to know what it is, and they have to know that they're either male or female at birth.
So, okay, what do you propose? Do you propose that children grow up in a very neutral environment with neutral names?
Most of the time, like most likely, children are have their like birth given gender shoved down their throats, and that they need to be this, be that, stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
but they still don't feel comfortable that way.
Well, I feel like when you're a child, especially if you haven't reached puberty, you're still figuring out what life is in general. Like what it's a very I when I look at children, I look at kids who don't honestly kids who don't give a shit, people who don't worry, kids don't really worry about their identity in a per se. They
Yeah.
worry about just experiencing life in general. They're still maturing at that age.
Yeah,
um,
but parents and just society in general shoves gender down people's throats, like starting off with like in elementary school. like the bathrooms, like they either have to go into the male or female bathroom. There is
Mhm.
nothing else, like because it's shoved down their throat that they have to be this or that. But it should be, if because they're like you said, they're children. They should just be like experiencing life and stuff, like not worrying, and they shouldn't have to worry that they have to choose male or female when using the bathroom. Like they should, like schools should just have gender neutral bathrooms because then they wouldn't have to worry at all or have gender shoved down their throat. Like they have to be this or have to be that.
Well, if we're talking about kids in general, if we're talking about elementary age kids, I don't think it's gonna make a difference per se if they were a child and they were told, okay, since you're a male, go to the male's bathroom. If you're a female, go to the female bathroom. Because they're all children, it's not gonna matter to them. What's gonna matter more is probably playing and just experiencing life. When it gets to the age when they start maturing, when they reach puberty and they start actually discovering themselves, I think then they should have. I mean, I get the notion that they're probably forced, they're probably struggling in the sense that they're
Being forced to use one
socialized.
bathroom.
Yeah, yeah. In a sense, I get it when they're in high school where that could be a problem. But then again, I mean, you could, this is probably me just being ignorant and not experiencing things, but when you're a male, and for example, if you're a male and you're transgender, it's not going to impact you necessarily if you were to go to a public bathroom and use a male bathroom. If you appear as a male, like no one, I don't see where you could be stopped and ridiculed. I guess, I mean, I'm obviously not transgender. I haven't experienced this firsthand, but I mean, I get it in schools, but I don't like in a public, like I just don't get it. Like in a public restroom, if you're going to the bathroom and you look male and you go to a male's bathroom, I don't see where you encounter hardship per se. Um, and I feel like if you're not comfortable at that point, that's when you should take steps to transition to appear in the gender that you're comfortable with, and then there are laws now set in place that allow transgender people to use the bathroom in which they affiliate themselves with.
Well, like 2 years ago when I looked like my biological gender, male, when
Mm-hmm.
I looked like that, when I would go into the male restroom at like restaurants, like my therapist, like stuff like that, I would it's just the fact that you know that you're in like the men's or women's bathroom. It's just like knowing it's like whenever I would use the bathroom at like at like a restaurant or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I was forced to go into the men's bathroom, I would I would always go in the stall because I just didn't I just wasn't comfortable, like going to the bathroom or
Yeah.
like just knowing. It's I feel like it's like because you have like experienced it like firsthand. Like I get like why you wouldn't understand it and stuff, but like it's just like knowing that you're there. Like stuff like that's like kind of where like the whole thing like started for me.
Well, here's my personal beliefs on it. I think that when you're a child, and I'm talking prepubescent, and honestly, people who are high school age too, anyone under like we throw 18 as the mature age, but anyone who's basically a child or under 18, I feel like they need time to really decide if, this is what, if I want to transition, if this is what I really want to change my life. Do I really want to change my lifestyle? Like they need to think about that before they do it. Because when you transition, you are one um, sterilizing yourself. You are choosing not to be able to reproduce. And that's a big decision for a lot of people. Not being able to have kids, that's not something you can't make decisions on when you're 10, when you're 5, 6, 7, 10, even when you're like 16, when you're just experiencing, when you're in high school and you're just experiencing life. I don't think you're ready for that decision. But I feel like when you're an adult and you're obviously going to experience your childhood going through some type of stress, dealing with your gender. But once you finally discovered yourself, I think then that's when you can take steps to transition. And I think it's really important that people realize that with people who have gender dysphoria, transitioning is a big decision, and it is changing your lifestyle. You're choosing not to be able to have kids anymore. You're choosing to ditch the norms and basically you're choosing to ditch your biological sex and affiliate yourself with this different gender. And I think that's a big decision that children can't make. That's why I think that to an extent, it's kind of inevitable that they're going to experience societal pressures when it comes to, okay, this is what males are supposed to do, this is what females are supposed to do. But once they discover themselves, they're able to transition fully and, stay comfortable with who they are once they've made that decision and are sure about it.
So, like, you believe that children shouldn't have the opportunity to transition?
100% not.
But how would you explain somebody like I don't even know if you know who this is, but they're like pretty big for transitioning at such a young age. Like Jazz Jennings. She started transitioning, I think, when she was probably like 12.
Mm-hmm.
So would you like say like that was like a very wrong decision on her part and her family's part?
I mean, it could have been the right one for her. It could have been the wrong one for her. But I'm looking at the grand scheme of things. When society, okay, not even society, when people start to make it okay for children to transition, children are going to care. They're not knowledgeable enough yet, and they're not mature enough yet to make decisions like that. Like, this is life decisions at the age of 10, 11, 12 to make a big life decision like that. I find that really ridiculous, because at that age you haven't even reached puberty, you haven't even experienced the hardships of life yet, and then you're making this really big life change at such a young age when you're so immature. And the worst thing that could happen is someone who transitions and then they decide that, oh, I'm not comfortable, they're not okay with being transgender. Like, they felt like, oh, I'm not okay with this gender, I didn't want to transition, I feel bad about it, they feel regret, and then they've been sterilized and they no longer can have kids. That's what I see as being problematic. So that's why I don't think children should be able to transition, because they will have time for that. They just need to find themselves and fully understand the risks that they're taking. And I don't think kids at such a young age can really acknowledge and grasp the risks that they're taking.
But like, how do you explain mental health professionals recommending that children should transition if they feel that that's what they should do?
Well, for one, if I don't understand why doctors are telling kids that they should transition.
When my doctors told me that I had gender dysphoria, they had me started transitioning, so I thought that was what would be good for me.
At what age?
I was like 12 or 11, I think.
I mean, I guess it's case by case. I just personally see it as when people start accepting the fact that when people start accepting children transitioning, I feel like children are carelessly just gonna say that, okay, people like Riley Dennis, for example, who I'm just gonna assume that he doesn't have gender dysphoria just for this example. people like him who don't actually have gender dysphoria, who self-diagnose themselves and then they transition and then they're no longer comfortable or happy with that. That's what I see as problematic. That's why I don't want children. That's why I don't think that children should transition at such a young age, because they're not ready for it yet and they have time for that. I feel like, okay, even at like 16, 17, 18, that's reasonable. I feel like when you get to a young age, like prepubescent age, like 12, 13, 10, 11, that's when you're still not ready and fully yourself. You haven't gone through puberty or anything. And I don't think you're ready for that at that time.
But when I was going through it, they put me on puberty blockers so I wouldn't go on puberty at all. So that when the puberty blockers fully started to work, then I would just go on estrogen. So like, how do you like feel that children don't go through the puberty of the gender that they were assigned at birth and are already transitioning?
Well, here's the thing. Puberty is pretty, like, it's a pretty significant time in a person's life. It's when they start, like, for example, for females, it's when they start menstruating. That's when they start ovulating and they are able to
Reproduce.
have kids. Yeah, they're able to reproduce. So that, even going through puberty, could be like the instant moment that they decide that they're comfortable with their gender. That could be a moment where they realize, okay, I'm okay with my gender. Puberty is just an important time in their life that I feel like many people, many children should go through before they make a decision that they want to transition, because that's when you fully experience being as your biological sex. If that makes sense.
But like, how would you like address a person who has not been through the biological sex that they were born with, puberty, like at all, to like they literally have gone through nothing? And
They
how
haven't gone through puberty.
how would you say that to somebody like that they've never experienced puberty, and you think it's like a bad idea for them to transition because they've never been through like the puberty of like their biological like sex at birth?
Well, personally, I mean, if I was like the doctor or the psychiatrist, I mean, I feel like it's important to, honestly, I'm not even like, I don't have a degree in that. I'm not experienced in that yet. I'm going for a pre-med track, but I don't have experience in that. But I feel like it's important to tell the child that puberty is an important part of, you know, being your biological sex. When you're female, you undergo, when you're male and female, both genders undergo an important time in their life. When they undergo puberty, that's when they start developing their, that's basically when they start developing their reproductive organs or systems or whatever, their gonads. Um,
But what
so I
about
think,
a trans child who would rather experience like the big life event of puberty as the opposite biological sex?
I mean, if they go through it and, you know, they're at like a reasonable age, I feel like, or an age where they're mature and comfortable, and they're knowledgeable about the risks that they're taking, and also that the parents are knowledgeable. I think above anything, people discredit the importance of um, having your parents on with this. When you're 16 or 17, I feel like you still need your parents' acknowledgement on this, because when you're a child, even at 16 or 17, you might not be mature enough to make a decision like that. If your parents are behind it and you're still like a minor, I see that okay. If your parents are okay with it and you understand the risks, then that's fine. I don't see why that would be a problem, but I see it as being a problem when we have children who haven't even experienced puberty, who go on puberty blockers and transition, when they haven't even experienced the most important part of being their biological sex, the most important time period. for them as a person, as a human being.
But that's what happened with me, and my parents and myself still agreed to it.
Well, have you gone through puberty?
Well, now, but when I thought that, oh, I'm female, and when I
Mm-hmm.
started, and I hadn't been through puberty at that time, when I
Yeah.
had started on like hormones and stuff and puberty blockers, like that's like, and like my parents were on board. Like I thought I was gonna like good with it. My therapist and like my psychiatrist were good with it, so I started on them, and like I thought I was gonna
Yeah.
be good, but it turned out I didn't. When I started to identify as that, I not like I didn't. It's just that I wasn't comfortable at all, even though my parents, like all the people that needed to agree with it agreed with it.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's like even if like
Well, how did the doctors diagnose you with gender dysphoria?
they go and like your parent, well, this is just my personal experience, but like my parents went in with the doctor and talked with them for probably about like 2-3 hours, like about me and like how I've just like been my entire life. And then
Mm-hmm.
I went and talked for like a minute, answered, or like went talked for like probably like an hour. Then I like had to answer a ton of questions like about like being suicidal, having like depression, having like extreme like social anxiety, things like that. And like they still like okayed me and thought it'd be best for me to start to transition. But now, as being identifying as agender,
Could you see where there could be a problem with that?
the fact that it was just like questions and things.
Yeah. Like, can you imagine if there was a child, for example, that went in and the doctor asked a bunch of questions and they lied?
But like even like you even said like when the parents okayed it, the child
Mm-hmm.
was okay with it, the psychologist was okay with it, like the therapist was okay with it, then
At
it
a
should.
reasonable age, like post puberty.
But I wasn't post puberty, yet they still thought it'd be best for me.
How I see it is that puberty is an important time in your life, and when you bypass that, that might not be the case for you, but that could be the case for a lot of people because before puberty, um, like I said with females, they haven't even like had their period, they haven't even ovulated or anything, and that's an important part of being a female. Post pre-puberty, I didn't have like I didn't know what it was to be a female in a sense that didn't have my periods, didn't ovulate, didn't have breasts. These are just like common things. And then when you make that decision that, oh, I'm not comfortable with my gender, but you haven't even really experienced what it is to be your gender, I feel like that's very problematic. And it's also problematic in the sense that the biggest decision you're making is to no longer have kids. Now, a lot of people don't take that seriously, but a lot of people, because, a lot of people don't take it seriously because some people don't want kids. But at 10 years old, at 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, deciding that you never want to have kids, that you never want to reproduce, have kids on your own is very problematic because what if in the future you want to have kids, you can no longer have kids unless you adopted? I don't even think IVF is an option. Um, that's very problematic, I feel like.
But even if it's problematic, if the child feels better with transitioning, even if they like at the time, even if they feel better that it would be best for them to transition, and like they know they can't have kids, things like that, like their own biological children, and they're
Mm-hmm.
okay with that stuff like that, then they should still be allowed to transition because that's what they think is best for them. That's what their parents think is best. Like that's what everybody who should think it's the best option, they think it's the best option. So they should have the right to transition, even if like one day they decide like I just can't do this anymore, like I want to have kids, things like that, then like
Hmm.
at one point they felt that they would be better the other way and things like that. But they should still have like the right to transition because
Yeah.
that's how they felt or that's how they feel still.
Well, okay. Do you at least agree that it should be with parental consent?
I think to a certain age it should be a parental consent must be involved.
Okay. How about like under 18? Like with
Under 18, I agree with with some ages, but like any age like under probably like
like
without parental consent, probably
prepubescent?
I with I feel like parent consent is needed before puberty, but like after puberty, I don't think parental consent is needed. Well, well, it's to a certain age, but
Okay. I personally think that it's like 18 under with anything else that law has it. I think if you're deemed a minor, you shouldn't it has to be with parental consent. I also do think that they shouldn't be able to before puberty. That's just my personal opinions. But I think we should agree to disagree just because I feel um, we have legitimate reasons, but they're just
to back
different.
each side up, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to come to a conclusion with it and agree.
And I it will like the whole like is gender a social construct argument and just like that whole like big open like general like concept will
Hmm.
probably never have a like definitive like conclusion.
I feel like the one thing that I feel like we agreed on the most is sex being a biological concept, and also the fact that there just isn't like enough research on gender dysphoria to
That
necessarily,
like
yeah,
to be able to come to a conclusion.
yeah,
Like even
exactly.
though we're both like even though you're like gender is biological and I'm like gender is just a social thing, like
Hmm.
like there just isn't enough research to like back up either side to prove that one is true, the other one isn't at all. You know?
Exactly.
And I feel like that's how it is with like the whole just like gender transitioning, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
There will just never be enough information to
Yeah,
like decide things like that.
exactly. Um, so should we just end it at this?
Yeah, I think this is a good point to, stop.
Okay. Thank you for talking with me on a live stream. Are you, I think I'm gonna post this on my main channel, or I'll
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
DM
definitely.
you about this.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll DM you about this.
Okay.
Um, for everyone else, thank you for watching. Do you guys here? I'm gonna end the call in just a second. Do you guys want me to do this more often in the future? I honestly feel like a lot of people aren't even like paying attention.
I know
Like
they're literally
everyone's
talking about
talking like
13 Reasons Why.
Sims.
It's only
Yeah.
13 Reasons Why because somebody said, "Hey, it's Hannah Baker."
Oh my gosh. No, don't end it. We are bonding. Oh my god.
But I think it'd just be better to put it on like your channel and stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it on my main channel just because I feel like this was like this like I was expecting a lot worse, but this was actually like decent. Like this was,
Informative to both sides.
yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna end it at that. Thank you for coming